All right, we are live, Nerdarchy.
Here we go.
Hey, Nerdarchist Dave here with Nerdarchy, for Nerds by Nerds, with some of my esteemed colleagues.
Ted.
Ryan.
What are we going to be talking about today?
Today we're going to be talking about terrible terrain.
And there's something special about this because we're doing it live.
We're doing it live,
That's right.
and we're doing it for Brigade Con.
Right.
And there's a little bit of business to get out of the way first before we even get started. So, you know, we're doing this event in honor of Brigade Con, and Brigade Con is an online event, which you guys probably all know about if you're here watching it. But we're also trying to do something good. We're trying to raise some money for Child's Play.
Right.
As you guys know. And there's two ways of doing that right now. You can go to the brigadecon.org
and make a donation.
And make a donation, which should be in the description below. I know it definitely is if you're watching it on our YouTube channel. And also you can get the Brigade Con 2014 t-shirts, which all the proceeds are going directly to Child's Play, which is all very cool. So I don't know. We got this panel. We're supposed to be doing stuff and talking about something. Anybody guys have any idea what we're doing here today?
Well, isn't the whole idea to talk about planning an encounter and using the terrain to make it more memorable and more?
I heard a rumor about that. Yeah. So okay. So guys, if you're familiar with Nerdarchy, then maybe you've seen our Game Master Tips campaign building, and that's the kind of style and format we're going to go with. The only difference is today we have the questions up. So if you guys have questions, you can type them in, and we'll answer them to the best of our abilities.
Which is, isn't that great, but we'll see what we can come up with.
Yeah,
it could be bad.
We'll make some stuff.
We'll make some. Yeah, exactly.
It might be wrong. You guys will tell us in the comments.
Right. So, do we want to start off with just a basic premise on working in the encounters that we worked on, or
the way we sort of processed it and came up with ideas?
I feel like this all started with that one monster that we ended up picking for the encounters.
Right, like where it was ultimately going to go.
Yeah, I think I feel like we started with we want to have an Illithid in this, and then we went from there.
Yeah, and that can definitely be how it goes. Like, so okay, so this panel is called Terrible Terrain, and it may not exactly mean what you think it means. To us, it's about building interesting encounters, and the terrain is everything. In this context, it's the adventure, it's the monster placement, it's the dressing of the dungeon,
right? The actual physical aspects of where the encounter is going to take place,
right?
Kind of thing.
And it can also represent any obstacles or things that you put in there to for your PCs to either overcome or interact with.
Oh, wait a minute, we got someone right here. We've got our first question already before we even got started.
Oh, sweet. What do you got?
Nice. I'm currently working on a fallen dwarven city. I had Dugar took it. However, do you have any suggestions on creatures I could add
That would want to hang out with the Duergar.
So, okay. Anything from the Underdark is going to work. And then also it's got to be monsters that are cooperative in nature.
Right.
So, and with Dugar, there's one thing to keep in mind too with your Dugar. The Dugar, their main thing, especially in 5e, and this has been prominent throughout the different editions, is they're slavers.
Slavers, and they have the savants.
They could have enslaved, chained hookars. That would be really cool.
So they're going to have all kinds of humanoids as slaves, lesser races,
goblinoids, this and that. Yeah.
But I also remember from, I don't know if it was R.A. Salvatore that had them riding giant spiders. They had mounted cavalry on giant spiders, which is
you could do spiders
cool.
or big bats. If you have a big enough cavernous area.
Well, and also of course, like the Drow use the riding lizards,
yeah,
which is also a way to go. But that's just really the kind of generic stuff. But if you want to really make it your own, you could do different things. Here's a great example right here, right on the cover of the monster manual of something that could be in league with the Dugar,
possibly even.
Or their overlord.
Think it's the overlord.
Yeah, the beholder's thinking it's in charge. The Duergar think that they're getting one over on the beholder, and that's something that if the PCs are going to actually encounter, it's a role playing niche that they can figure out and work with.
And I would say from the terrain-minded aspect of that is you have all those creatures, but then you have in the Underdark, you can think of it kind of like
the ecology.
The ecology, you know, you've got strange plants, strange mushrooms, myconids. You also have, you could have myconids even on side chambers if you try and like, oh, we can't go through the main gate, and we're trying to sail this. You go to the side way.
Did something completely different, right?
Oh no, what are we doing completely different?
Go with like some Snurf and Edli, right, and have like a corrupted faction that are working in league with the Grey Dwarfs, because like that shit never happens, right?
Right.
But if you put it in your world,
it just did.
It just did, which is kind of like cool.
Do we want to have a dedicated, maybe cover this and then have like a dedicated Q&A section? Because I mean, you know, we could get dinged by questions as they come in and not actually get to the whatever.
We'll just
we'll just say that if we get too many questions, we'll do videos. We'll do another video, and we'll make sure we answer everybody's questions.
Well, one more thing with the Underdark, you have like a regular cave is not just like structured stone castle on the ground. So like it's not like they might have a fortress-like center, but all the outskirts going to be
broken ground,
difficult terrain. Yeah, it's not going to be just a flat surface. You're going to have to be climbing. You're going to have to be going across trenches.
You know, also here's the thing too. Like, all right, so we're going to go into the part that we actually kind of prepared, and you know, we want to go through that process with you guys, so this way you can understand how we do it. You know, so we sat down and said, okay, what are we going to do? We're going to do 3 encounters, and we're going to do one at low level, medium level, and high level. And in this case, like
high level is 9s, 10s.
Yeah, 9, 10. You know, mid level is like 5 to 8, and low level is anything below that. So at first we were just picking kind of random shit from our campaign world that we've already kind of touched on and done. You know, let's play with this. And then I think it was Ryan that threw out the idea that he wanted to do something with an illithid.
Right. Love doing things with illithids.
Yeah, you're really freaky like that. So,
and then the thought wound up coming of, why don't we make something that is all linked together? So
right, so they'd be in like the same plot arc.
Yeah, a story arc.
So we created this organization called the Gilded Trident that is all based on pirates and yacht clubs.
Well,
and the
let's talk about the methodology a little bit first.
Sure, go for it.
So we went backwards with this one. We started at the top and we worked down. And so we said an illithid. Well, okay, if we have an illithid, how's that possibly going to tie into our low level, adventure
without totally
encounter?
Thrashing the PCs and all that.
Yeah, without them just becoming mind slaves. So we came up with the idea that the illithids are, basically trying to take things over, and they're infiltrating. And then we're kind of like, well, how do we do that? How do we want to do it? And then the idea was brought up of how do we come up with
we wanted to do something not blatantly Underdark with illithid, because that's like the very
the go-to
stereotypical thing. Then we were talking about, we have these sort of like invaders from far realm thing that we were that in our world that we were looking at. We wanted to play a little more into that. And then I was talking about in an earlier video that that ship, the idea of that ship that came out from somewhere else, that at first we were thinking it was going to be in the Underdark, but I was like, what if it was in the bottom of the sea?
In the
ocean?
Because we went to illithid, and but before we even went to under the sea with it, it was going to go back to the Underdark,
right?
And then we came up with an organization. We wanted like a cult. We came up with this idea for a Kraken society, but we decided Kraken was overdone.
So overdone, yeah.
So we went with Gilded Trident, right? And working from there, we're like, okay, but it's still a little bit too much for the PCs. And what is this Gilded?
Well, and also, go ahead.
What is the Gilded Trident? So what we came up with, what it actually is it's an evil yacht club.
Right. Yeah. It's like a noble society.
Yeah, noble aristocrats and who are trying to
control everything around
them. Mercantile ships. And so that's like the mid encounter is this, yacht club where the guys are, and they don't do all that stuff themselves. Right. They throw money around to get that to happen.
It's a front organization that has, two purposes. One, it's a place for rich to be able to come and
Party.
party
their
and
yachts.
party, throw
Boats and hoes.
Yeah, that's
throw money
the
around.
money. That's the money laundering part.
And gain control of stuff, as well as the seedy underside of it is the people who are in the know have the ability to, get information trades, be aware of.
It's almost like
actual,
a well-heeled Thieves Guild.
Yeah,
Right.
it's like
a
upper crust Thieves
yuppie
Guild.
Thieves Guild, basically.
Right. And you get that whole part of it that is all subtextual.
And and that organization is working on a two-pronged attack. Essentially, they're amassing political power.
Yeah.
And in addition to amassing political power,
the arm strength.
yeah, they're also amassing criminal power. So they're kind of working with the seedier side of things.
Hiring private privateers,
Right.
Yeah. So the idea was, okay, so how do we tie that? Like even at that, that's going to be way above a, starting PC's abilities and capabilities. So how do we tie it down?
What does the low-level party handle? What can they actually handle? They're not going to be able to handle this whole organization that has all this political power, and it's a big clubhouse for people. So what then? Where do we put the PCs into it? Where do they come in? Where do they start?
So with that in mind, we're like, all right, well, it's a yacht club. It has to do nautical boats. So we're thinking, all right, pirates, right? So
Who doesn't love pirates?
what
Really?
they're doing is they're employing pirates to actually attack their rivals in order to basically steal their stuff and also
cripple their trade a little bit.
cripple their trade
Yeah.
and make what they're doing more lucrative.
So you have the situation of the pirates come in, they either weaken their foes, quote unquote, by having them have to pay for the deceased, or they manage to take the boat, sink the boat, and get the trade goods all at once. It can easily put people out of business without them actually losing anything.
Yeah, from the political aspect, you have the people actually employing the pirates elevating themselves in status because of their success in the mercantile industry,
Right?
And gaining a big power base, and also gaining money because they're fencing the stolen goods from the other ships, or sticking it on their ships and sending it to some far-flung place and making money. While at the same time, no one's really contracting with those other ships because in the houses that seem to be getting attacked,
Because they can't protect their own stuff. Look at that. They're-
exactly.
Yeah.
And these guys, the Yacht Club guys, can have a few fake attacks on their ships that they obviously fight off with their superior,
With their mighty armies.
with
Yeah.
their superior people.
So now we got to look at the progression, right? How does this pertain to becoming an interesting encounter? So from the very get-go, from the very beginning, like the player characters could be hired to figure out or to
defend, to guard a ship, or
defend, guard a ship, or figure out
who's doing it.
who's doing all,
Yeah.
who's sacking all these ships. And, after some investigation or doing the guard thing, they encounter our first bad guy, our first big bad.
Now, a good thing to point out before we start is to describe it is that this could be in the port if it was more of an investigative campaign, or it could be
Out at sea.
out at sea if it felt right for the players to be hired on as mercenaries. Or so you can kind of go two ways. You could have it where they discover it and they basically confront the group while they're in port, or they could be confronted at sea through a more combat oriented scene.
Right. And which
In either
both,
case, it's going to be fighting.
right. And both are interesting. And that brings us to basically our first encounter. Did we name our pirate?
I didn't actually go ahead and put any names down.
Did you name our pirate?
Sure. So that's Wart's the Star. That's it was based on the little PC Dwarven Invoker.
Okay, so when we started talking about this, don't roll dice like my brother here, but he had a great idea for a character way back when in 3rd edition. Was
Yeah, a Dwarven Invoker who also basically fancies himself a pirate captain. Like his ultimate goal was to be the captain of a ship.
and
Eventually.
he had a familiar.
Yeah, he had a toad named Matey that would sit on his shoulder there. So yeah. In this edition, I might maybe we'd go with a monkey because it could wear like a costume. Like, basically, you could do like the Jeffrey Rush thing from Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yeah.
Like name it Jack. Yeah.
So all right. So we're going a little bit against type with a invoker dwarf pirate, and which really it works really good for 5th edition with the backgrounds. It fits right in there.
Just take sailor. Yeah, bada bing, bada boom.
Right. And then so the idea then is, when they finally confront this guy, it's going to be on the ship.
Yes.
And ships are a great place to have an encounter.
Because you not only have all kinds of interesting, improvisational weapons, but all that stuff that's lying there can be a hazard, to the PCs. You have the ship being able to be rocked back and forth because of waves, because of wind. And
You can have fog.
You can have the
You
fog.
could have a storm.
All the random crap on the deck, like barrels and stuff,
cargo.
that you can kick at people, and
and whoever whatever NPC is currently at the wheel, they have the ability to influence that ship as well. If
they cut it really hard.
Yeah, if you cut it really hard while someone's making a charge, next thing you know, dex check or you're overboard.
Yeah, and the sailors, the pirates could have a code or something that they shout,
right,
for the purpose of letting everybody know, oh, hey,
this
we're about to turn left, or we're going to turn
What
right.
about the Archer PC that shoots the wheel?
Yeah.
So they can influence. You have all the rigging and the ropes. You have multiple levels.
Yep.
Well, yeah. The forecastle, and I forget what the other elevator, because there's the two raised parts. Then there's like the mid deck part of it.
Right.
Yeah, usually where the helm is.
Yeah.
But
then you have the guy in the crow's nest, and that's a great place to put an archer.
It is a great place to put an archer, or a good position to take,
or be a caster of that too.
True.
So you got all that stuff going on, which just makes for a much more interesting encounter. Plus, too, it depends on what kind of game you're playing. Like, we just got done the meat grinder, which was very free flow. And if you wanted to try something, Andrew Knapp, SR2 Joker, is the kind of DM that goes, all right, drop this die or drop that die, and you can try anything. And personally, as a DM, I like to do that as well. So if someone wants to grab a rope and swing from the aft deck to the forward deck, why not? Or or they want to cut the ropes on the cargo to try and make it fall on some of the pirates. Why not?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now we picked Invoker for the main baddie of this pirate ship. I thought one of the really good benefits to Invoker was that he could target with area effect spells that wouldn't affect his other allies. So one of those that we talked about was Thunderwave, which is a basic first level spell, but when it pushes a guy in metal armor off the side of a ship, it's a really deadly spell.
Yeah.
So there's kind of like a fear factor that happened.
If Thunderwave isn't good enough, you can also do the same thing with gust of wind. And as a pirate, heck, you'd want that spell anyway.
You'd have gust of wind. Yeah,
just to help on those not so windy days.
There's spells like Scorching Ray too for taking out the enemy's sails. Stuff like that.
That's also a good point about. Are you saying with the Scorching Ray? Everything's flammable on a pirate ship, pretty much. So,
on any kind of
ship, if it's wooden, it burns.
Yeah, so. Fire really is the enemy.
So that's a big hazard that is easily started, especially with the cantrips and
a couple ways of running this encounter. One is the straight up you board the pirate ship and it's a battle. That's going to take a little bit higher level party, or they're going to get swamped with numbers. The other is they sneak aboard.
Right, or they even join up, like they sneak their way into the organization.
Oh yeah,
they actually become part of the crew.
So in our arc, what we're thinking is that either the players can either make Wirtz talk, or going through his logs and his journals, what they find out he's actually working for this organization, and they find ties to the Gilded Trident, which is, as far as the players would know, unless they have really good criminal contacts or something, is a legitimate organization of the aristocrats of the city.
Yeah.
And it adds a new level. So now they have to figure out what the tie is.
Yeah, and that could take a bit of time. You don't have to do it. It's not like, A to B to C right away.
Absolutely.
So you can have smaller encounters. We're just highlighting.
It could be a mini adventure all by itself to decipher that information.
Yeah, well, I mean, this encounter on the boat, you're looking at a third to fourth level party to try and get to it. So you want to have something to work up to, this type of thing. And the same thing is going to wind up happening on our encounter in the yacht club.
Well, and you can even go a little bit lower too if like your main objective isn't combat.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, like if it's to investigate and get evidence and find proof of what's going on.
That's why I was suggesting about the dock. You could have them get the dock guards or city guards or whoever patrols the dock patrol, the master of cargo, whatever you call those guys, I don't know. But basically, you could find out through investigation and contacts and more political intrigue aspect to the game, find out where it's docked and when it's docked, or find that it's coming in based on some kind of schedule, and just have the city guard come up to him, and you're a part of it, and you just kind of like interrogate him in some way. So it would be more of like a role playing, less combat, because you've got a group of city guards with you. I mean, what is the guy going to do? Get killed? Like right there.
Well, maybe a mass battle.
Yeah. So, in which case you'll have
in.
you'll have a lot more assistance with the NPC guards.
So one of the reasons why we decided to do this line of thinking anyway is because there's so many more interesting go. It doesn't have to just be combat.
Yes.
It could be an investigative kind of campaign, or it can be like a dungeon crawl, depending on how you set it up. Because, what's a dungeon after all? Like, lurking your way through the ship, could be a type of dungeon.
Absolutely.
Right, yeah.
Going
room
through
after room after room. Well, I mean,
going through the mansion.
Segments,
Going through the mansion can be like a dungeon.
Yeah.
So that brings us to the next section after they figure out what's going on in the first encounter.
Yeah, they have the yacht club of the Gilded Trident.
The evil yacht club.
The evil yacht club.
Yeah.
Where basically all the aristocrats and power players for the
Gilded Trident.
The Gilded Trident kind of like hang out and do all their evil things. Congregate.
Yeah. So, and here's the thing, right? With this type of encounter or the premise here, because it really is not just an encounter; it's actually a whole adventure. But the idea is the club actually has different circles to it. And as you work your way into the tighter, smaller circles, the more nefarious purposes become known.
They can even have some kind of theme thing, like first prong, second prong, third prong. If you want, if you want to go along with the Trident theme,
right, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But like the outermost circle, which is the bulk of the organization, is probably legitimate. They don't really know that they belong to an evil club.
They're like the security guards for the front gate. They're like,
but also the people that are just socially.
Security guards don't always know what's going on the inside. They're just
they're just hirelings. But no, you have
the actual
base
membership.
The membership where they think they're just joining a yacht club,
a social club. Yeah,
and the inner circle that's actually being controlled and influenced by an illithid uses this base as a vetting process to find the upper crust that has the right criteria for what they want.
Right.
The right mix of money and evil.
Yeah, pretty much.
Money, evil, and influence.
Or that are able to be easily controlled.
Well, that works as well.
They don't necessarily need to have the right molding.
Just
if they're just idiot. Absolutely. He could just throw them and say, okay, that works, move on.
Well, or just political positioning as well, where they legitimately put people in positions to do things that they might not normally do.
Right.
That just like that would happen in the real world. So but as you get closer to the heart of the organization, you're getting closer to the illithid and what it really wants, and it's controlling. And we're thinking like most of the organization, even the inner circle, doesn't know its true nature.
Right.
Yeah, I think there should be one guy that is willing to screw over everybody else.
Because the illithid keeps like, you're my man, you're the guy I'm going to take care of.
So he actually knows in some way or fashion that the super evil yacht club guy in the center is knows that it's really an illithid, and he's fine with it.
He's all for it. Yeah, I have an idea for that one too.
Yeah.
So, from there, the idea is from interrogating these people once they finally infiltrate, and like we're thinking like the final encounter. we do have questions. Oh my God, we have questions.
Should we finish the stream of thought?
Yeah, we'll finish the stream of thought, and then get back to we'll get to those
questions. Yeah.
So we're thinking that the actual final encounter where the players would confront the organization actually would happen like in a masquerade ball in the ballroom, because
like a band playing the whole nine.
Yeah, it could very much be like very James Bondish as
right,
well.
Yeah.
But
maybe gambling tables going on. Yeah, it'd be beautiful.
But it's so great because you have chandeliers, you have giant wall hangings, you have balconies. I said chandeliers already. You have either orchestra pit or bandstand.
You probably have tables with nice covers on them, so people can you use the chairs as weapons, hide underneath the tables, throw food,
or depending when it happens, you could have bystanders as well.
Yeah, hostages
and people you're trying to keep people from being harmed.
Yeah.
So what are people asking us?
So why is the organization of the city?
Why the organization of the city should be this way? I disagree with this. All right. I'm not quite sure
what he's asking there.
What you're asking there, what you disagree with.
He wants to know why is the organization this way? It's kind of what he's.
Which way is that? Evil? I mean, there's a lot of different ways to go with organizations. I mean,
well, at the very top is this mind. It's all about what the mind flayer is doing. Basically, he's found a spot that he can influence because he's trying to. The mind flayers have their own purpose, and the Yacht Club is just a means to an ends for the mind flayer.
Right. Well, the mind flayers always
and the Yacht Club guys have their own desire for power. Not all the members, and it's a yacht club, but the some of them are in with this idea of pirating other merchants, other nobles, basically amassing power. Nobles like to do this.
Yeah. Well,
I would like to find someone who disagrees with that. But.
A mind flayer is generally a monster that kind of considers itself noble in some way, shape, or form. They consider themselves, like so many other monsters, better than the regular humanoids that inhabit a world. They really think, well, I should just turn everything into slaves to
slaves or food.
Food.
In our particular game, Griffin Gaff, mind flayers, I feel like it's like a seed ship that's looking to do its own. Like basically like either have herds, whatever purpose, it's seeing this world as something to be used and something to gain from it. So it's got to properly navigate the stuff that's already here. Mind flayers just can't go up against everybody and be like, all right, I rule you.
So if they're
going to be opposed.
This particular mind flayer is looking to infiltrate into humanoid society, and he's going to want to mingle with the cream of the crop, the creme de la creme, if you will, which is the nobles. So he obviously comes up with this scheme of using them, and then it filters down to
it's all about access,
right?
So the idea with this encounter is once the players kind of break into the organization, and again, there's a lot of different ways of doing it, and they kind of break this cabal of aristocrats. There's going to be clues leading back to that, oh, wait a minute, there's actually someone else perpetrating this.
Right.
And, kind of the thing is, like we said, only one of them really is in league with the Illithid as it is.
Right.
And if you trickle all the way back down to a pirate, he just thinks he's working for this organization.
Right.
He has no idea that he's working for this monster. And actually, a lot of people in the organizations, they don't know they're working for the monster either. So, from that standpoint, once the players start, figuring this stuff out, putting the clues together, that there's another force at work, so what happens, like that pirate, right? Say he wasn't killed, he was captured or arrested, or even got away. What happens when he finds out that he was actually working for you know, a
Yeah,
monster.
A
Right.
creepy crawly.
Right,
sort of
like he
creature.
might
Yeah.
be, might be like, I'm a real schmuck and a bad guy, but heck, I'm still a human.
Yeah,
Or
I
humanoid.
still
yeah,
think
yeah.
humans or dwarfs are better than creepy monsters.
Yeah.
So, you know, so
we-
from there, that brings us to our next encounter that we're working on.
Right. So yeah, from the sort of like the Noble Yacht Club, which would be on the sort of ocean front of the city, we were thinking it'd be kind of cool for the PCs to find the Illithid's like submarine that he has docked. So basically, some sort of high fantasy submarine vehicle. So that he's pilots, you know, it's probably got some sort of like psionic interface, you know, like a Cerebro sort of thing from the X-Men, you know, like a helmet that goes on and he sits on this weird freaky chair and he pilots it that way.
Yeah,
So
the Mind Flayer is like a native psionic, but it's not really integrated into the rules. So it's kind of like, oh, it says it's psionic and he has these powers, but
yeah,
they're like spell-like effects.
yeah.
But this particular one
yeah.
has is the variant that actually has mage powers as well, which is
yeah.
why he was able to infiltrate, because he actually has disguise and the ability to magically look like not a scaly tentacle, scary tentacle monster.
Yeah, and like maybe after the PCs get done the fight, you know, they see like this guy start heading out or whatever, like they get the sense that something's not right with him and they start trailing him, you know, and then like all of a sudden he's in like an escape vessel, you know, and they have a chance to catch up with it.
Yeah, they might see it leave port and then sink into the water, and they're like, oh, well, how do we find this? And then maybe they interrogate the pirate again, find out information. Oh, I used to drop off the main guys when they wanted to go visit this guy, so he kind of knows the drop-off point or the meeting point for this organization. That's where we get to the third part, which is the actual encounter on the submarine. And with that, we talking about having aberration style things, which is we were talking about reskinning like a combination between a Kotoa or whatever.
Well, yeah.
And a human.
So like here's one of the ideas that we had. That in the final encounter with the Illithid, he's going to have lackeys and minions. So we decided to add another layer to this, and we were going to go with these minions. They look almost like regular people, except for like, you know, maybe the irises in their eyes are so big that you can hardly see the whites. And they kind of have like a far off look in their eyes, and they have gills and webbed fingers,
And they look
and
kind of
toes.
bloated and drowned, maybe a little.
A little bit, and covered in mucus or slime. But the thing is, when the players look closer, what they really see is they see city folk that they may have encountered before. Or
no, that's where you blatantly put in people that they've interacted with to make it more effective. Yeah.
Absolutely. But still, like even like, you know, dock workers from certain places are going to have kind of a look to them.
Right. Yeah.
You know, people from certain areas are going to have a look to them. So it's really easy to integrate that in there. So a lot of what we did for coming up with these encounters and coming up with the monsters is we use monsters right out of the monster manual, and we just tweaked a few of them.
Yeah, for the aberrant humans, we tweak them.
Right. And so the idea with our aberrant humans is we wanted to basically have the Illithid working with an aboleth later on. So the mutant humanoids we got really is just like foreshadowing. You know, so if the player is kind of like, they're going to want to, you would think that they're going to want to try and help these people.
Investigate that lead sort of thing. And maybe because they recognize them and like see that they're like not quite right, maybe they have a mind to like not outright kill them and want to like eventually try and help them.
Yeah.
So you could do like subdual damage as opposed to, you know, murdering the townsfolk.
Well, and like in a game like 5th edition, they've made it real easy where
you just say, I'm not going to do lethal damage basically. So.
Now you're talking about that the Mind Flayer, like for a fourth encounter, there'd be the Mind Flayer with Aboleth. It'd be kind of creepy if the Aboleth was actually like located in the sewers of the city or something, some kind of network, that underground water caves or something. That
well, you could, but then we were angling back towards the underwater city. Well, the ship, the main ship that the Illithid had, the seed ship.
Let's go back to the third encounter though. So it's on the submarine, and we were going to have it was going to be kind of steam powered as well as psionic, right? That we were going to have some kind of like there's going to be this
because you could have
issue with
steam vents that
yes,
were opening up.
steam vents opening up.
Well, basically,
kind of an
interesting
engineering-
things to do with that encounter. So you have your main encounter, right? You perhaps it happens in like a engine room or something along those lines, where at random intervals, steam shoots out, which could cause difficult terrain. It has an obscuring effect, possibly damage.
Light damage, yeah, like a D4.
Possibly there's controls somewhere in that same room where you can actually take control of how it works.
Yeah, I was thinking that if it's in the engineering section, those could be combined with. It doesn't have to be up like a starship or something. It can just simply be there's the mechanism. It's a smaller submarine. The mechanism and the steam power and the engine and the control are all in the same big room.
Yeah, we have a really good question here. Very cool so far, guys. Keep it up. Here's my question: how do you get the PCs excited about the storyline? PhD&D.
You threaten them. You threaten your character.
Well,
Your character will die.
an obvious way is to have it linked to, either a character that they know, an NPC that they are actually employed by, or that as a mentor. They could be hired as it's part of the, they're hired for it by someone that they specifically know, or mayhaps they're waiting for something and it's been stolen by this pirate captain.
Which they're all methods, but here's the thing that I'm thinking, right? It's basically kind of either a seafaring or urban campaign to begin with.
Right.
Yeah, you could use this in everything.
You kind of want to have characters that have ties to that place.
Right. So, I mean, even it's setting expectations. Hey, I want you guys to make characters for a seafaring/urban campaign.
Yeah, a port city.
Right. A port city campaign.
Or, a big river city, that kind of thing.
And, depending on, like in 5th edition, there's a ton of stuff in the backgrounds that you could probably use and manipulate to get your players to bite into it and get excited about it, especially like criminal background, noble background, folk hero background. All of them are very heavy RP based benefits.
You could even say, if you manage the player's expectations as a DM, say, hey, I'd like you to choose noble, sailor, folk hero, one of these.
Pick like a half dozen
that are going to go along with your campaign. So I mean,
I don't like that. I don't like telling players what.
Well, you could just say what would be a good.
Well, you could just tell them these would be really beneficial and helpful, and it's going to be an urban/seafaring campaign.
The difficulty with this question to me is it's a very blanketed question where I would get my players excited about this campaign and this story arc is I would personalize it. And without actually having the characters in front of me, it's impossible to say. But when I just started a campaign and we did a session 0, we had everyone make up their characters. And, from that session, I came up with like 3 sentences for each person based off of something they told me. So right then and there, I find when I take that information that the players give me and I give it back to them,
in the storyline,
I don't have to get them excited.
All right. So, for example, let's say there's a guy with a sailor background, but he's now in the city doing something, and whatever character class he is, his former ship captain could be one of the ships that were targeted by the pirates.
Yeah, like that. And
stuff
like that
he's
makes
asked
it easy.
like a personal favor from the guy he admires and looks up to, or got him started in his new life, whatever the case may be. So that character is going to feel almost an obligation to help out his former captain.
The captain survived but is injured and can't physically do it.
Yeah,
anymore.
that would be better.
He's saying, "Hey, can you go do this? Because I can't."
Or even too, if they're like a more random assortment of player characters, but they just happen to be aboard ship and they're there to like help repel one of the attacks, and then like that's foreshadowing of this pirate captain thing happening. And then at a certain point, they're like, there's a bounty. If you take down the ship, there's coin in it for you. So it's like they've physically been there and saw what these guys do and like how ruthless they are or whatever.
Yeah.
And so this way, it gets them a little more engaged too.
Yeah.
So yeah, so there's like there's definitely a ton of different ways, and it just depends on what your players are like, the players themselves and what kind of characters they have, and then you just want to find ways to integrate their story with your story. And I find anytime you do that, you're never gonna have a problem getting them excited, because all you're doing in their mind is the stories just become about them. And I find most players will bite on that every time. So hopefully that answers your question there. And what do we got?
Brent's doing a horror game. He wants to know how to do interesting encounters beyond undead in crypts. And horror is a little bit easier than people think. You don't need to stick to undead and crypts to make it, scary. You can pretty much do any type of monster, and all you have to do is just have the scene set properly. If you've got a foggy night in the middle of town and you've got either eerie silence or just something that just doesn't feel right, you can have a scary scene without actually a monster being there. Just make the PCs.
One word. When you're talking horror and then get the things going, foreshadowing.
Yes.
Just you can just make the PCs think that something is going on, and just keep egging it on, and let them decide the action. And when nothing happens, it's just going to make them
on edge.
On edge for
when
longer.
Is it going to happen? This is the real question.
And the same thing can be done in a forest, pretty much anywhere. And if you just keep them on the edge of their seats, it doesn't matter what you're throwing at them or how often you're throwing it at them. It's that mood, it's that theme that really sets that horror.
For inspiration, just look at the thaumaturgy, the cleric thaumaturgy cantrip, like the shuttering windows, shaking doors, like just things rattling, say, and sometimes it's just the wind, and sometimes it's not, like, or the how many times have you seen in a horror movie where like it's a quiet moment and all of a sudden there's like a rush of bats or whatever that comes swarming through, and it was just bats, but like being swarmed by bats is kind of creepy and unnerving because like they're like winged and they're kind of furry and gross and like
decent descriptor I think is key when you're describing a scene for horror.
And then the other thing too is like, because I think he's kind of asking about adversaries as well. The adversary in a horror game can be anything. It really can, because if you look at like serial killers like Jack the Ripper and that kind of stuff, that falls right in that same genre.
Or like cheesy horror movies, like The Mimic could be Deathbed, the bed that eats.
Yeah. I mean, me and Ted did a video talking about a mimic terrorizing a village. And like people just keep going missing, and there's a scream around the corner. It's blood curdling. People go running, and they come around the corner, and all they see is a blood stain and a barrel.
No one's going to think the barrel did it.
and have it in a valley where it tends to be foggy a lot. And creepy fog, there you go.
So, horror is it's a lot easier than you think. And there's a lot of different ways to do it. And it's all about setting the mood and what happens.
Creepy people around, like the sort of like the Dagon sort of thing, or Innsmouth. That sort of just like the people are very weird and superstitious, and very clannish.
But you could pretty much go through any humanoid that's in this book, and you can make it scary, and you could set it in such a way that it makes a good horror villain. You have to have that mood. You have to have that setting fit for it.
And red herrings
throwing people off,
are key. Make them expect one monster and give them another.
Absolutely.
What if you do pick like a classic horror monster and they're convinced, your players are convinced it's going to be that, whether it be a vampire or whatever, but yet it turns out to just be a sociopath who is just a human, that gets his jollies from doing this stuff.
Like in one game I ran before, I had this, everything was pointing to it clearly being were rats. it was this guy that was basically betrayed. He was a Thieves Guild member. He was betrayed by his guild, left for dead in the sewers. He ended up like finding pipes to the sewers and like befriending like rats and like.
That sounds really familiar.
Yeah, I ran that game for you guys back in the day. But like, yeah, everything was set so you guys would think that it was were-rats. And I'm not sure if it worked or not. But like, so he was going around executing his former accomplices, you know, in the city in very gruesome murder scenes. But yeah, and it was just like the idea was it was like a sewer Jack the Ripper sort of thing going on.
And a creepy horror monster that I like him. I read it and I was like, oh, this would be really creepy. Kenku. You can have them in urban settings, you can have them in other settings, but they're like crow raven people, and they have speech and pantomime, which they can't talk and say anything that they haven't heard before, but they replicate it exactly. So if it's begging on the street, it can make the sounds of coins clinking, but it could also say weird things in a little girl creepy voice that it heard before, or it can string together strange, like, sounds discordant and out of whack speech that might sound like several people talking. And you know, they're black. If it's like night, they could just be out in the shadows and you never really see them. You might just see glowing eyes or something, and things are stolen, people might be killed, and that's the kind of, you know, elusive, what is it? Is it some kind of spectral thing? How's it getting into the houses? Where's it going? And it makes weird noises that are really difficult to explain.
Think about it like that one. What if you have one in particular, Kenku, that just almost, I want to say specializing, but that's your leg. I want to say specializing, but not necessarily. Maybe most of its speech pattern is in like the little girl creepy voice,
or doors creaking
and weird noises.
Yeah.
You know, so that thing all by itself would be like a walking horror show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
or like you know, the guy from Police Academy that made all the sounds.
Oh yeah,
An important thing to remember. I was thinking with Kenku, I was like, oh well, they'd have to all experience the same thing. Well, no, really, one of them could experience and then say it to the other, and then they've heard it,
right?
And then all of them have the ability to do it.
Yeah.
So
this is completely unrelated, but it reminds me of this. You know, so I work in construction and I work with a lot of Spanish speaking guys, some of which don't really speak much English. And they would say, there would just be a group of them and they would say jackass and Catelli. Because, you know, they would just mimic what they heard. And it was just like this one guy that they would end up working with whose last name was Catelli. And he would say jackass all the time. So it was kind of funny. So maybe they're really Kenku. I don't know.
But touching back to what you said about the red herring, you know, it could be really like terrifying to the players if you go with that red herring. You make them think it's a vampire, but you have them looking for it at such a low level that the PCs are actually terrified that you're gonna throw a vampire at them when they're like 3rd, 4th level. There's no way they should be coming anywhere near a vampire.
You know, but to a certain extent, you have to kind of like, you got to play that one right. So they're like, there's no way the DM would throw a vampire at us.
Right. Yeah.
You know,
I think a good horror game involves a bit of, you know, double and triple guessing by the PCs. Like, is he really doing this to us?
You know,
nah, he couldn't be doing this to us.
He
likes us.
It's
I really think it's a vampire.
It's almost like that whole, you know, meat grinder, you know, thing of like, okay, well, you don't know what's going to be around the next corner. You don't know what's going to happen. And
don't know when you're going to go into a wall of annihilation.
Yeah. But on the flip side of that red herring, you can have it where, okay, you think this is just a creepy thieves guild, but it's actually were-rats, and you don't find out until you're like, oh, these guys are doing terrible things and killing people by biting them to death and all kind of strange stuff. And like, this is just really messed up, but there's no clues that it's anything except like whack job humans. And then you find out when you get there that yes, there's really bad things about to happen because you're surrounded by were-rats, or there's a werewolf, or something on that level that you weren't expecting. Not because it's above your level, but you expect it. Just regular, you know, vanilla mortals, as Dresden would say.
So let's go around and go with, you know, what we each think makes for a good encounter in our opinion, or what we personally do when we're designing an encounter. You know, what's our kind of like MO for each of us.
All right, why don't you start off?
Me. Goddamn. Well, I mean, so you have to have things that are going to work together tactically. Like, you know, you need some breaking terrain, or some, you know, like you need some thugs that are going to be standing in front of your casters to take some of the melee, you know, guys off of him. So, yeah, basically just a good tactical mix is kind of the way I would go.
Okay. So I kind of go from. I like to go thematically, so I kind of have an idea and work out from there. You know, like the campaign I'm running now, I knew I wanted to do the encounters and everything around this phenomenon we have going on in our world called a chaos bleed. You know, so you know, and for me, like for this particular encounter, it was the bringing the party together encounter.
Right.
So I have, and I always this is like one of my favorite ones to do it, and I've done it throughout all of our campaigns, is where I build that the keystone encounter to the rest of my campaign is that first one, I think, where I bring all the party together. And, you know, I think that I'm really good at not letting people sit there and wait for their turn for a long time, and giving everyone a reason based off of information that they've given me or we've worked out together
to be there.
And you know, it usually sets the tone for the campaign for me from that one encounter. And you know, it changes from game to game, but it's always based off a particular theme that I'm able to weave together from everybody's backstory, and then the whole campaign usually builds out from there. And so for me, you know, like you like to figure out tactically what's going on, so more like, I guess that's more mechanical. You know, I like to work on that story element that personalizes it to each individual I have in my game and build out.
Okay. I'd like there to be something visual, be it something that, you know, one of the NPCs does. You know, I had a giant wall of fire that was created in one of the games. I wound up, you know, having a set of pillars that were set back that the kobolds were hiding behind in another encounter. So they were hard to see, hard to get to. You know, and it both of these things was something visual, something challenging all at once, and it offered, you know, what would normally be, oh, this is this kind of encounter, but by having that extra thing in the way, it's more memorable and, you know, more challenging.
So you like a centerpiece.
Yeah, I guess you could put it that way.
So you like a centerpiece. You like the mechanics. I like a theme. What do you got for us, Nate Dog?
Pretty chaotic in a sense of like Kenku. I just developed something for Kenku based off of looking at it and being like, I want to use this monster. And while, you know, with given more time, I'd probably associate that creepiness or that, you know, that scene and that collection of scenes with other things to kind of integrate it. So I guess I like to think of different little pockets of events, and then how one I can say, well, you know, the Kenku might be linked to an actual legitimate thieves guild, or they might be linked to some kind of weird crazy guy. You know, but as I link them to something, I'll be like, okay, well, how's that guy react to those Kenku that he interacts with, and what does he think about them? And then similarly with how we did the story arc with the Mind Flayer, you know, we kind of started with Mind Flayer, and just everything exploded out of that. It's kind of,
so you like breadcrumbs,
breadcrumbs, and I also like because, well, I haven't DM'd a game in a really long time, but I kind of like to integrate the characters as I go. But I do like Dave's method of the start off being really strong in that sense. But I think for organizing the whole of the campaign, well, I'd have that centerpiece of getting all the characters together and getting them invested in it. I like the, you know, well, hey, do you want to go west or east? You know, like,
yeah, the sandbox.
I'm more sandbox-ish.
Yeah.
But I'm sorry, I like to make it look like it's a giant sandbox. It's not really, but that's all like, just pay no attention to the guy behind the curtain.
Yeah. So now that we're like an hour into things, I would say that just like sort of the worst thing you could do is just have like a 20 by 20 room or whatever dimensions is a room. I think best practices is just like you have those like 3 like nice juicy lines of like flavor text that are just going to be like, you know, this room has like lush tapestries, and you know, so you pick these very like visual words of description, you know, like describe the flickering of the candles, but you know, like 3 really just tight sentences.
You don't want to sit there and read 3 paragraphs about what's going on for every single encounter,
like you're reading Wheel of Time or something.
But having descriptions so that you are engaging your players in the visual aspect, because I mean, let's face it, majority of the time you're sitting at a table with, you know, a map and some plastic miniatures and moving things around. They're not fully engaged in the 3-dimensional, you know, you're in a cave or you're in a forest and there's all this stuff going on. You know, you're looking at, okay, I'm moving through this little, you know, grid.
Well, one of the other important things, and like I'm guilty of not doing this as much as I should, and it's easy to fall out, is basically bringing in all the senses. You know, as the GM, as
taste,
the
how many times
master,
are your players going to go up to stuff and lick it?
Yeah. Well, my one online game, my one dwarf cleric insisted on healing people that way, I think. But
if a crypt smells bad enough, you'll taste it.
All right.
You know, but you know, you as the GM, you're the portal into the world that your players are going to see. So they only know what's there if you tell them. You know,
right.
So by telling them that, you know, when they enter the crypt that it smells bad, it's musty and they smell mold, and you know, you can see the motes of dust settling in the firelight.
Well, in my last session, you know, that you guys had entered into a room which essentially was a torture chamber, and you know, there was the smell and almost the taste of you know, the foulness that was in that room. You know,
well, you described it that way. That it smelled so bad you could practically taste it, and you know, we had to, you know, and we could barely contain ourselves from wanting to vomit in this room.
Yeah,
I think
Ryan.
I think there was some rolls to actually
not vomit.
Yeah, I think I just made my
and you know,
character
dim lighting, bright light, sunlight, that kind of thing can all be involved as well. Setting them, especially if you're with horror, if you're setting the mood, or if you can also in that same description throw in a few keywords to kind of let them know, well, what's the mechanics of it. If it's dim light, well, if you don't have dark vision, it's going to be difficult to see things. You know, is there a issue with is something on fire and you've got to deal with that. You know, if you don't let them know that the room's on fire and they walk in, well, and then you're like, well, take fire damage. You're like, for what? You know, they, like you said, you're the gateway. The DM's the gateway,
right? Or you know, in that same situation, if you're talking about a room with a fire, well, if you have fire, what else do you have? Smoke.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, you got smoke, so it's hard to breathe. You know, it's hard to see. Your eyes burn.
It changes how you're going to enter that room.
Yeah. So it looks like we have
all.
another question in the field, and then we should probably look to wrap up.
Yep. Peter wants to know about dealing with ankle biter creatures, whether we do anything to, you know, use them or create rules to make an encounter more difficulty.
Tactics, yeah.
You know, as a DM, using smaller monsters, they generally have like a bunching or swarm effect.
Well, like a horde of fiendish cats or something.
You know, you either have a swarm, which is a series of creatures that are making up essentially a mass, and there's more than you could actually define or swing at. So they make up what's called a swarm. But if you're talking about lots of tiny creatures,
well, he was talking specifically like kobolds.
Yeah, he's talking about nuisance monsters.
Okay.
Yeah. Like the kobolds, the
I
goblins.
didn't feel like they were just a nuisance the last time.
Well, I mean, and the thing of it,
we almost died.
Here's the thing of those is like you might encounter ones that are like just like taking the spoils of whatever they were robbing or whatever, and like that should be an easier encounter. But once they're in their lair, they should be super nasty because they know like they're gonna have all these things like, you know, escape tunnels, murder holes, traps, all that stuff. Like you should be terrified to go into a kobold lair.
you know,
Yeah,
and
goblins can be the same way. Small creatures, right? They're going to know their lair. They're going to have hidey holes that they fit through, and you don't. You know, unless you happen to be small.
so you could sit there, you know, they could sit there literally, you know, come out of a hole, shoot you with some kind of missile weapon, and then step back through an area that you can't get through. You know, so that can really make it tricky. But you know, encountering them out in the wilds, you know, they're going to just be that kind of a nuisance. unless you really strategize that well that they're ambushing you.
Well, yeah. Is it an ambush? Is it? Oh, we're surprised to see you.
Yeah,
You
they're
know, kind of
rarely
feel.
going to go toe to toe with you anyway.
Yeah,
They
you
can
know-
be hit and run.
Just throwing those kinds of monsters at players is a lot of DMs do it when they're new, and they're just matching up what the players can fight to the monster.
Right.
They're not really looking at it through the eyes of the monster. And when you look at kobolds, are actually a fairly terrifying monster, because when they do face you, it's only when they think they can win. They're cowardly monsters are actually the worst kinds to face, because if they're being brave, they have a reason for it.
Right.
And it's not because they're brave. It's because they think they can win and they don't feel like they're in danger. Those kind of things are going to do different things tactically to be more challenging. They're going to ambush you. They may hunt you for a long time. You may see signs of them before you actually ever see them.
They should, if done properly, a kobold is going to hamper and harass you before you can get into melee with it.
Yeah, it's about attrition, hit and run tactics, using snares and traps, maybe using
Ranged
poisons, using using minion creatures,
Ranged weapons.
ranged. Well, yeah. I mean, once kind of combat's engaged, and even when they use ranged weapons, they want to use them from somewhere where
Max range, just about, yeah.
where you can't get to them from.
Right.
On a ledge, in a tree, again, where they feel secure. So and
Otherwise, they would just run.
Exactly.
They're cowardly in the sense that if they don't feel like they have the advantage, they would just leave. So you're going to run them down. Probably be running them down to a hidey hole that they have trapped.
yeah, and there's tons of them.
Yeah.
So those kinds of monsters, I always feel like they should be used tactically.
Yeah. Because they want to live. In the end, they want to kill you, probably eat you, and live.
Yes,
So-
and they certainly do not want to fight to the
At
death.
the very least, take your stuff.
So how are they going to how are their actions going to show that motivation?
Well, when I usually do it where when you get to a set percentage, it could be anywhere from 50 to 70% of loss. Once combat has actually engaged, and they suffered that kind of loss, the what's left is either going to just surrender and beg for mercy so that they can live, or if they can get away, absolutely do that.
I'm glad kobolds are cowards, or we wouldn't have made it through that encounter with you and your game.
So
three of them ran away. Thank God.
Yeah,
So, according to the sundial, we should
Yeah.
probably be
Okay.
about wrapping
Yeah,
up.
so we're supposed to be wrapping this up at
7.
7:01.
If
So
anybody else has questions that they want to field to us, I mean, you can stick it in the comments and we can
below.
just do another video about this.
we have a website, nerdarchy.com. We have the Facebook Nerdarchy fan page.
We have a
And,
subreddit, Nerdarchy.
We obviously are on YouTube, in case you're not aware. You can check us out on our channel there.
Right. So all those places you can go and ask us your questions.
Right,
And
absolutely.
or if you have videos you want us to do, we can do them. But until next time,
Stay nerdy, and thanks for hanging out with us.